Hello, I'm Kerry Bull, and I'm pleased to present this research snapshot on behalf of professionals and researchers in early childhood intervention, more commonly known as PRACE. I'm here on Dja Dja Wurrung country, and I acknowledge the traditional custodians and pay my respect to elders past and present. Today, we're discussing the article Standards for Early Intervention, Early Childhood Special Education, the Development, Uses and Vision for the Future by Vicky Staton, Jennifer Kilgo, Eva Horn, Peggy Kemp and Mary Beth Bruder. I'll briefly talk through the article and we'll then hear from the lead author, Vicky Staton, from Western Kentucky University. Vicky will stimulate our thinking about adapting the standards for an Australian context. This is important for us to consider, given the current reforms and workforce issues we face in the early intervention sector. Professional standards identify what future educators should know and be able to do when they complete a program of study from an institute of higher education. Professional standards for early intervention and early childhood special education have the potential to ensure specialisation in the unique knowledge, skills and dispositions required of professionals, provide for a continuum of standards for special educators and facilitate teaming and collaboration among related allied health practitioners who provide services to young children and their families. In 2020, the first early intervention, early childhood special education standards were developed in the US through the Council for Exceptional Children and the Division for Early Childhood. The standards aim to support a comprehensive, coordinated personnel development system. This article introduces the new standalone initial practice-based professional preparation standards for early intervention, early childhood special education, and their role in establishing a comprehensive, coordinated personnel developmental system. More specifically, the authors discuss the rationale for standalone standards within the current context, introduce the standards, present an overview of how the standards were developed, and provide a vision for and guidance to the field in the development of personnel systems that ensure the application of the standards for pre-service and in-service preparation, program accreditation, cross-disciplinary collaboration, and research and development. The authors describe the development of the standards that reflect current evidence-based practices, which stem from current research as well as professional and family wisdom and values. Developmentally appropriate and family-centred practices, as they apply to young children with delays and disabilities and their families, provide the conceptual foundation for the standards. And the standards intentionally cross age ranges and settings, including children from birth to 8 years of age and their families. An iterative process with support from the Early Childhood Personnel Centre was used to develop the standards, which included firstly forming a 15-member standards development task force, then reviewing related research and standards, brainstorming content areas through listening sessions, requesting qualitative and quantitative input from the field on draft standards and components developed through a public survey. Using results from this survey and listening sessions to make further revisions to the standards and components and inform initial drafts of supporting explanations. And then requesting a review of the standards, components and supporting explanations from the Council of Exceptional Children Professional Standards and Practices Committee. They continued to work on the development of supporting explanations and additional products to illustrate each standard, conducted additional sessions, and second public survey focused on the standards, components, and supporting explanations. They were revising summaries of feedback from the listening sessions and public survey in order to integrate the feedback into further revisions, submitting the edited standards, components and supporting explanations for copy editing, drafting, reviewing and editing knowledge bases and performance indicators for each standard and component, and finally, drafting, reviewing and editing an introduction to the standards, rubrics and a glossary. The final early intervention, early childhood special education standards include, firstly, child development and early learning. Second, partnering with families. Third, collaboration and teaming. Fourth, assessment processes. Fifth, application of curriculum frameworks in the planning of meaningful learning experiences. Sixth, using responsive and reciprocal interactions, interventions and instruction. Seventh, professional and ethical practice. And finally, eighth, field and clinical experience. The standards were developed for the following purposes: higher education programs of study, higher education program accreditation, professional development, cross-disciplinary collaboration, and research and development. For the first time, the early intervention, early childhood special education field in the USA has a set of standalone professional standards. Australia has previously developed national guidelines for best practice in early childhood intervention that will be reviewed in 2024. However, we've not developed national professional standards for the ECI sector. This article outlines the standards and describes the process of how they were developed, and in doing so, the article provides us with guidance on how we could approach the development of standards for early intervention practitioners in an Australian context to support pre-service training, in-service learning and development, program accreditation, cross-disciplinary collaboration, and opportunities for research and development. Let's listen to this 10-minute footage of lead author Vicky Stainton discussing the key elements of the article. Hello, Vicky. Welcome. It's great to have you with us today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Terrific. We might just get started, Vicky, if you can talk to me a bit about implementation. I'm so interested in that. How are the standards currently being used in the US?
They're currently being used in four main ways, or by four main groups. Of course, the primary group right now is higher education faculty, using the standards to either develop new programs or revise their current curriculum to align with the standards. Also, for higher ed programs that go through a national accreditation process with an organization called the Council for Accreditation of Educator Preparation, or CAPE, those programs are using the standards to document how they have integrated them in the program and what kinds of assessments in particular they're using to ensure that students are being prepared with those standards. Another main group is professional development providers, and they are being encouraged to actually apply the standards to their curriculum content for ongoing continuing education. And there are some states, for example, that have statewide systems, one in particular that I know is using the standards and applying them to their statewide professional development system. Another group are states, and we do have some states now that have actually, instead of developing their own state professional standards, have adopted the new EIECSE standards, which is really our goal that they do that. And I do want to mention with the use of the standards, we've been very fortunate in the United States that we've had a technical assistance center funded through the U.S. Department of Education, the Early Childhood Personnel Center. And that center has provided not only resources to support the development of the standards, but lots of materials to help in using the standards. So that has been especially advantageous for us. And I know you've included a link to the ECPC or the Early Childhood Personnel Center in your materials you're going to be providing.
That's right. Your technical assistance centre is so impressive, something that we really look at and would like to be able to have in Australia too, that kind of support for practitioners. Yeah. Thanks for talking about that. It's impressive to hear, particularly about how some of the states are picking up on that. The other thing I'm really interested in, Vicky, is about the process and how you went about developing the standards. Can you talk with me a bit about what were the strengths of the processes that you used?
Sure. I want to refer back to ECPC.
Yeah.
That was a major plus for us. That center was able to provide funding in terms of the time for two of the members of what we called a leadership team. And those two individuals were very knowledgeable about standards and the standards development process. And then there were two other members of that leadership team. But that team actually developed the agendas for all of our meetings, ensured that we followed the timelines, knew in terms of the kinds of materials we need to develop, what kinds of materials need to be developed, and so on. And so ECPC was really instrumental in that we were able to have the time of those two individuals to support the work. The other thing I'm going to mention is we had a standards development task force that was a 15-member task force that was identified through an application process. That was definitely a strength of the process. Those individuals were very knowledgeable about standards. Not all, but many of them were in higher education themselves and had used standards in their own program and for accreditation purposes. And then we also had professional development providers as part of that team. In addition to the other resources that ECPC provided, they were able to provide travel funds for that task force to actually attend face-to-face meetings. Over the 2-year period, we met, I guess the first year, probably on average, monthly or every 2 months, and then not as frequently the second year. But the task force, as well as the leadership team, felt like that was very instrumental in having the resources to be able to meet face-to-face. And then, of course, part of the work was then conducted with virtual meetings and small group work between the face-to-face meetings. Another resource for us was that the standards are actually standards of the Council for Exceptional Children and the Division for Early Childhood. CEC is the parent organization, if you will, of DEC. DEC is a division of that association. But there was a strong collaboration there as well. And there was staff from both CEC and staff from DEC that attended all the face-to-face meetings, supported the work in conducting follow-up activities and so on. So that was a major help for us to have that resource as well. We also found it very important that the National Association for Education of Young Children, which is the largest association in the U.S. for general early childhood education, was a supporter. They actually wrote a support letter when we were seeking approval to develop the standards, but they also had a representative that was on the task force. And then CEC had a representative on the task force as well. So that ability to collaborate with other associations was very helpful. I've already mentioned the task force members themselves were extremely knowledgeable and were very committed to this work. And then I would be lax if I didn't mention that we had a large number of volunteers, both within DEC and CEC and just the early childhood field in general, who provided input all along the process. So we actually had 2 different webinars, one kind of toward the end of the first year of development, and then one in the second year, where individuals were provided with information but could provide input. There were 2 surveys that went out for input, went to all the DEC members and other individuals in the field. And then we also had multiple listening sessions at national conferences. So that was really helpful to get input from the field, and really all along the way buy-in, because it wasn't just the task force, it wasn't just the leadership team, but individuals across the country were able to provide input into the development of the standards.
This collaboration comes through very strongly in the article, and it's lovely to hear that from you too. So it sounds like that was really a key strength throughout the whole process. Vicki, in Australia, we don't have standards such as these. I wonder if you could just give us any recommendations about how we might advocate for the development of similar standards in Australia.
First thing I'm going to say is be persistent in advocacy. This was a long time coming through the Division for Early Childhood and Council for Exceptional Children to have standalone early intervention, early childhood special ed standards. And we had been advocating for those standalone standards since probably, I would say, the late 1980s. So it was a long, persistent process. And it just seemed like the time was right when we got approval to develop the standards. I've already mentioned the collaboration, and you kind of reiterated that. I would say identify who your key partners are. I did a quick Google search this morning and saw that there are a lot of different associations in Australia that seem to be related to different aspects of early childhood, as well as government agencies. So I think identifying who those key partners are to advocate with is really important. And then the third thing that I wanted to mention is both CEC and DEC are international associations. And it was very intentional when the standards were being developed that they not be in terms of the content or wording so specific to the United States that they couldn't be used in other countries. And as an example, we use the term individualized plans, which we know many countries have individualized plans, but with different names. So we purposely didn't use the names we call those plans in the US. So that would be another thing. Once you get to the point that whatever entity has to approve this being done, if there's an entity that has to approve or work with you to move forward, is if you could take a really careful look at the EIECSC standards, and as much as possible, if they're relevant for your context, use them. And I would say if not, maybe some small tweaks would be all that might be needed. I mean, I can't speak per se to your context, but I know that was our intent in the development, was that we don't have to all recreate or create something new if these are applicable in Australia.
Mm-hmm. That's really fantastic to hear, and a real reminder about the generosity of the work that's done in the US. The sharing is fantastic. I love hearing that you think the time was right when you were doing this work. I think the time is right in Australia right now. We've got a lot of reforms happening at the moment, and we need solutions to some of our workforce problems, and I think you've given some real guidance for us around that. So thank you, Vicky, for sharing your wisdom and expertise. It's been great to hear from you.
You're welcome. It's been good to talk with you, and I wish you well as you move forward in your work.
Thank you very much. So where to from here? You can find the standards and relevant resources by visiting the websites highlighted here. You can also hear from Vicky's colleague, Mary Beth Bruder, who's talking more about the personnel framework developed to prepare, support and sustain the early intervention workforce at our Precis conference in May 2024. There'll also be some further resources on the Precis website, including a recorded webinar featuring Mary Beth Bruder later in 2024. A little bit about the researchers. They're all from the US. Vicky Staten from Western Kentucky University, Jennifer Kilgo from the University of Alabama, Eva Horn, the University of Kansas, Peggy Kemp from the Division of Early Childhood, and Mary Beth Bruder from the University of Connecticut Health Centre. We hope you've enjoyed listening to this research snapshot and have new insights about the development of professional standards. You can find more snapshots on the Precis website. Thank you for listening.